Hi friends, you'll know Stormpoint has had a big update in Season 19 of Apex Legends. Over 40% of the map was changed, with 6 completely new POIs. So I've got you covered in this video with an updated loot map where I'll highlight every new POI on the map and also the loot tier of every other POI across the whole of Stormpoint. You can use this to help guide you on the best places to drop and rotate on Stormpoint. And it won't just help you in pubs. This is going to be especially useful for ranked as well, where you need to play more strategically in Season 19 to help you rank up. So here's the loot map I've put together for Stormpoint. As normal, high tier loot zones are marked in purple, mid tier loot zones are in blue, and basic tier loot zones are in grey. For Stormpoint in general, I find hot drops do tend to vary based on where the dropships are. Obviously, having 6 new POIs, a lot of them are very popular at the moment, particularly the Pylon, which is Watson's Town Takeover, and Zeus Station, which is also new on the edge of the map. However, on a bigger map like Stormpoint, as I mentioned, where people drop does tend to vary based on where the dropship is heading. I do recommend trying out hot drops when you're in pubs or when you're in a lower rank, but certainly when you get to those higher ranks or even when you're in your promotional trials, it's definitely a better idea to pick a more sensible place to drop on the map. And that's exactly where you can use my loot map. And I would say this applies to you unless you're a triple stack and you're really confident you can beat any team in the lobby. You're going to want to choose where you drop more carefully, and this especially applies to you solo players. Now I would say the best places to drop, particularly as a solo, are towards the outside of the map. This is where the best loot is, and you can see that with the higher tier zones pretty much all spaced out around the edge of the map. If you're landing more central, you can see there's a lot more mid and lower tier zones. One other thing that's important for you to remember is that IMC armories are now destroyed. So yes, that means you can't use them in the same way you could last season, but they do still have high tier loot in them, and because they've been destroyed, you can actually loot them a lot faster now. So it can also be a good idea to land in a drop spot where you've got an IMC armory. They do tend to be quite busy. The one in trenches near Northpad and the wall is probably the most popular one. I find the more quiet one tends to be the one near Mountaintop, although do be aware that Lightning Rod in Season 19 is a lot closer to the main island. So if you're landing in this one, you might actually bump into the team from Lightning Rod a lot faster in Season 19 than you did in previous seasons. Just something to watch out for. In terms of the bad rotations or the ones you want to avoid in terms of landing, I would often say those are the ones where you land in a place that don't have many buildings and is considered a low or mid tier spot. In fact, it's one of my pet hates as a solo queue ranked player when I've got a random teammate that's the jump master and they drop us in some small tiny POI on the map that only has 1 or 2 buildings when we're an entire squad of 3. It just doesn't make much sense because if your loot tier is lower and there aren't that many buildings for you to loot, you're going to end up with less loot across the 3 of you, plus it's going to be lower tier loot than most of the other teams you're going to be facing. So even though it may seem like a little thing by picking a higher tier loot zone, it could actually help you win more games and do better in ranked if you do consider more carefully where you're dropping in ranked. I should say it's not completely impossible if that happens to you, so don't just give up. But it doesn't make sense to limit the amount of loot you can get or the quality of your loot. So use my map here, look at where those high tier loot zones are, and try and get used to landing, if not in, at least near those high tier loot zones so you can pick up some high tier loot. Now the secondary strategy for your rotation is, if you're landing in a high tier loot zone, you always really want to try and rotate through lower tier loot zones. The main reason you do that is because if you're landing in a higher tier loot zone, generally you're going to have better loot than any team that's landed in those lower tier loot zones. So this map not only helps you on where to drop, it can help guide you on where the best place for you to rotate is. And that's really going to help you in ranked again if you're thinking about picking up KP, perhaps for those promo trials, or you just want to rank up a bit faster, or even if you're trying to avoid the more saturated areas so you can focus on placement. Again, if you're trying to avoid more saturated areas, that's when you can look at the map, avoid those higher tier loot zones, because generally high tier loot zones tend to have more teams there. Also, don't forget the idea of landing in a high tier loot zone is that you can and should loot faster. And one tip I always give, which I'll finish this video with, is try to get used to landing in the same POIs. Really think about which POI you like. Is it high tier? Is it mid tier? Is it low tier? Always try and pick the high or mid tier, and then just get used to landing in that POI. Try it out in pubs, keep going there over and over again until you get used to the layout. You really want to remember where all the loot is spread out and where the best loot tends to be. You also want to know the area well. Where is the cover? Where are the buildings? Where are the zip lines? That kind of knowledge is really going to help you outperform any other team that lands there, and that's exactly how you can get those early kills, how you can gain more KP and LP in ranked, and also rank up faster. So hopefully this better helps you understand the new Storm Point map in Season 19 of Apex Legends, and where the best places to loot, drop, and also rotate are on this new Storm Point map. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.